Birthdays are supposed to be fun, right? Cake, balloons, a few good friends. At least, that's how I always pictured them. But my 13th birthday didn't go like that. It didn't go like anything I'd ever imagined. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in this old farmhouse on the outskirts of a small, forgettable town. The house was big, too big. Really, for just me, Mom, and my little sister Ellie. It creaked when the wind blew, groaned at night like it was alive, but we were used to it. Mom called it charming. I called it creepy, especially the basement. Everyone has that one place in their house they don't like. For me, it was the basement. The air was heavy down there, damp, and always smelled faintly of earth, no matter how much we cleaned it. But Mom kept the holiday decorations and old junk down there, so every now and then, I had no choice but to go in. It was the week leading up to my birthday, when Mom first mentioned the noise. "Have you heard it?" she asked one morning, setting a plate of eggs in front of me. "Heard what?" "At night," she said, lowering her voice. "It's faint but scratching, like something under the floorboards." I froze mid-bite. "Mice, maybe," she said, though she didn't look convinced. I didn't think much of it until that night. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard it. A faint, rhythmic scratching. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but it got louder. Right under my bed, I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, until it stopped. I told myself it was mice. It had to be. The day of my birthday came. I tried to forget about the noise. I was excited. Mom was letting me have a sleepover. Just me, Ellie, and two of my friends, Carly and Jake. By evening, we were stuffed with pizza and cake, sitting in the living room. Rain tapped against the windows, and the old house felt especially creaky that night. "Want to play a game?" Carly asked, her mouth full of frosting. "Like what?" Jake said. "Hide and seek?" Ellie blurted out, grinning. I hesitated. The house was big, full of shadowy corners, and the idea of hiding alone made my skin crawl. But everyone else seemed excited, so I forced a smile. "Sure." I was at first. I counted to 50 while the others scattered. The house eerily quiet except for the sound of rain and my own muffled counting. When I opened my eyes, the room felt different. Heavy. I shook it off and started searching. Ellie was easy to find, tucked behind the curtains in the dining room. Carly was under the kitchen table. That left Jake. I searched everywhere upstairs and down, calling his name. Nothing. Finally, I went to the basement door. "Jake," I called. Silence. I hesitated. The scratching noise flashed in my mind. My stomach twisted, but I pushed the door open. The stairs creaked as I descended, each step more hesitant than the last. "Jake, seriously, this isn't funny." At the bottom, the dim light from a single bulb barely cut through the darkness. Shadows stretched across the concrete floor. And then, I saw him. He was facing the corner, perfectly still, like he was playing some twisted version of hide and seek. "Jake," I whispered. He didn't move. I stepped closer, my hands trembling. "Come on, you're freaking me out." That's when he turned. It wasn't Jake. It looked like him, but his eyes were wrong. Black, empty. His mouth stretched into a wide grin that didn't seem human. "Found me," it rasped, in a voice that wasn't Jake's. I screamed, stumbling backward. My foot caught on the edge of the stairs, and I scrambled up them as fast as I could. The thing didn't chase me, but I swear I heard it laughing. Back in the living room, I slammed the basement door shut. Carly and Ellie were staring at me. "Where's Jake?" Carly asked. I don't know," I stammered, my voice shaking. "But it's not him down there. Something's wrong." Before we could process, the lights flickered. The house groaned, louder than usual, as if it were alive. "Jake," a voice called from the top of the stairs. We all turned. It was Jake, or something that looked like him, but his face was pale, and his eyes were still black. He tilted his head, smiling that same horrible grin. "Why'd you leave me down there?" he asked, voice dripping with mock innocence. Ellie screamed. Carly grabbed my arm, whispering, "What do we do?" I didn't know. My mind was spinning, and then I heard it again, the scratching. This time, it wasn't under the floorboards. It was coming from the walls. The lights went out completely. Panic set in as we fumbled for our phones. the dim flashlight beam shaking in our hands. "Get to the front door," I whispered, pulling Ellie close. But the door wouldn't budge. No matter how hard we pulled, it stayed shut, as if the house itself wouldn't let us leave. "Upstairs?" Carly shouted. We ran, J-Core. Whatever he was following us at a slow, deliberate pace. His footsteps echoed, too loud, too heavy, as if there was more than one of him. In my room, we barricaded the door with my dresser. The scratching was everywhere now above us, below us, all around. And then, it stopped. The silence was worse. Carly whimpered, holding Ellie close. "What is it? What does it want?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. A loud bang shook the door, and then another. Whatever was on the other side wanted in. And then, it stopped. We waited, breathless, for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When we finally opened the door, the house was still. Quiet. Jake was gone. So was the scratching. We never found out what happened that night. Jake's parents reported him missing, but there was no trace of him. Mom said the house was just settling, but we all knew better. The basement door stayed locked after that, and we never played hide and seek again. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. The scratching. Birthdays are meant to be special. They're a time to celebrate, to feel loved, to be surrounded by family and friends. Mine was different. It's the kind of story you'd hesitate to tell, not because you don't remember, but because you wish you could forget. It happened when I turned 15. We had just moved into a new house, a cramped, 2-story home in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where your nearest neighbor is a mile down the road, and the only thing you hear at night is the wind howling through the trees. My parents bought it cheap, too good of a deal to pass up, Dad said, though he never explained why. The house was old, much older than it looked in the photos. The paint on the walls was faded, the floorboards groaned with every step, and no matter how much Mom scrubbed, there was this faint, metallic smell that never went away. I didn't like it, but it wasn't like I had a choice. My birthday came less than a month after we moved in. I wasn't expecting much, just cake, a few presents, and maybe a quiet evening with my family. But things started to feel off as the day went on. It began with the power. The first outage hit early in the morning. While I was brushing my teeth, the lights flickered a few times, then went out completely. I groaned, spat toothpaste into the sink, and yelled, "Mom, the power's out." "It's the storm," she called back. "It'll come back soon." Sure enough, it did about 10 minutes later, but the flickering kept happening throughout the day. At first, I didn't think much of it. New house, old wiring, nothing unusual. But the weirdness didn't stop there. That afternoon, as I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone, I heard it. A faint, distant sound. Thump, thump, thump. It came from upstairs, rhythmic and deliberate. "Ellie," I yelled, assuming it was my little sister jumping on her bed. No response. "Ellie," I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. Annoyed, I climbed the stairs and pushed open her door. The room was empty. "Ellie," I checked the bathroom. Nothing. She wasn't upstairs at all. I was about to head back down when I heard her voice, faint and muffled. "Over here." It was coming from the attic. The attic door was one of those old pulled-down kinds, with a rope you had to yank to bring down the stairs. We'd barely touched it since moving in, mostly because Mom said it was just full of junk left by the previous owners. "Ellie, what are you doing up there?" I shouted, yanking the rope. The stairs creaked as they unfolded. Dust swirled in the air, and the smell of mildew hit me like a wave. I hesitated, but climbed up. The attic was dimly lit by a single, tiny window. Boxes were piled everywhere, their labels faded and unreadable. I stepped carefully, trying not to put my weight on the wrong spots. "Ellie." No answer. Just the sound of rain pattering on the roof. And then, I saw it. A single candle sat in the center of the attic floor, its wax melted into a messy puddle. It wasn't lit, but its presence felt wrong, out of place. I turned back to the ladder, a shiver running down my spine. "Ellie, stop messing with me," I called, climbing down quickly and slamming the attic shut behind me. When I got downstairs, Ellie was sitting at the kitchen table, innocently munching on a bowl of cereal. "What?" she asked, her mouth full. I didn't answer. That evening, my parents tried to make the day feel normal. They brought out a store-bought cake with bright blue frosting, sang an off-key version of Happy Birthday, and handed me a couple of wrapped gifts. It was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The power flickered again, just as I was blowing out the candles. "Perfect timing," Dad joked, laughing nervously. The lights came back on a second later, but I swear, for just a moment I saw something. A shadow, faint and blurry, moving across the room. "Did you see that?" I asked, looking around. "See what?" Mom said, slicing the cake. "That shadow?" Dad raised an eyebrow. "You're imagining things? Probably just a trick of the light." I wasn't so sure. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I was lying awake in my room, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but the wind was still strong, rattling the windows. That's when I heard it again. Thump, thump, thump. It was louder this time, more deliberate. It didn't come from upstairs. It came from the hallway, just outside my door. My heart raced. I pulled the covers up to my chin, holding my breath, straining to hear. The sound stopped, but then the doorknob turned. Slowly, the door creaked open, just an inch. "Ellie?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No answer. I reached over to my nightstand and grabbed my flashlight. With shaking hands, I turned it on and aimed it at the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I got out of bed, my feet cold against the wooden floor, and stepped into the hall. The air felt heavier here, colder. I shone the flashlight down the stairs, toward the front door. And that's when I saw it. The candle. It was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, perfectly placed in the center of the landing. This time, it was lit. I froze, unable to move, the light from the flame flickering against the walls. "Mom, Dad," I whispered, my voice barely audible. No response. The flame flickered again, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move behind it. Something tall and shadowy, just beyond the reach of the light. I turned and ran back to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart was pounding, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told my parents everything, about the attic, the noises, the candle. They didn't believe me. "Just a bad dream," Mom said, patting my head. But I knew better. Later that day, when they weren't looking, I climbed back into the attic. The candle was there again, sitting in the same spot. This time, it wasn't alone. There were others. Dozens of them, scattered across the floor, their wax melted into strange, unrecognizable shapes. I haven't been back up there since. And every year on my birthday, I hear it. Thump, thump, thump.